Hello everyone, my name is Xavier. I'm from the E9X channel. Welcome if you're new to the channel. I just wanted to make a quick video about it because I've only ever seen one single video on the entirety of the internet, and I think it should be said. These N55s tend to spin rods a lot, seize on the crankshaft, and so the crankshaft is no good. And so when that happens, you have to get a whole new crankshaft, and they're pretty expensive. Those N55 crankshafts are pretty expensive. And so I do some research and I think to myself, well, aren't the N54 and N55 basically the same thing? They are, sort of. They're sharing the exact same block, the exact same architecture. They have the exact same bore and stroke, exactly all the same things. So I buy a cheap N54, which is way cheaper than just a used N55 crankshaft. Now, what are the key differences between an N54 crankshaft and an N55 crankshaft? First of all, let's start with the N55. The N55, at least for the PWG version, or its first iteration, was a cast crankshaft with 6 bolts at the rear of the crankshaft. Now, why was it cast? BMW had in the idea that, obviously by being cast, it's way lighter than a forged crankshaft, and so the engine revs faster. And although it may be true, in all honesty, a forged crankshaft is way better. Now for the N54 crankshaft, there are 2 different iterations of the N54, and you have to take that into consideration. Now, both versions work for this swap, but one version is significantly easier because it has the same 6-bolt rear. The way we differentiate those 2 iterations is with the amount of bolt holes in the rear of the crankshaft for the flywheel. Now, up to January 2009, BMW used a 8-bolt pattern at the rear of the crankshaft, whilst after January of 2009, they started using a 6-bolt pattern. Both of them are forged, both of them are equally as strong. It's just that they changed the bolt pattern. You're probably gonna understand where I'm going with this. If you can get an N54 from, say, a 2009 car and up, you'll get a 6-bolt N54 crankshaft. And it's the simplest swap for you because you'll be able to directly bolt your N55 flywheel, your N55 magnetic wheel, all of that. One other thing to consider in this swap is that the N54 and the N55 read the crankshaft position in a different manner. And so you have to make sure that you use the correct form. For the N54 has this massive ring with a bunch of teeth, and that's just like your classic position sensor that just reads your teeth. But for the N55, BMW decided to change over to a magnetic wheel, I guess you could call it. You essentially just sandwich it in between the crankshaft and the flywheel, and then there's a sensor that just reads I guess magnetic pulses from that ring, and obviously everything is located with a dowel pin, which is on the crankshaft. And so you have to make sure that you swap that magnetic wheel from your N55 onto your N54 crankshaft. Otherwise, you will not be able to read your crankshaft position, and then your engine won't start. Now, the reason why I'm saying the 6-bolt is the easiest one is that even if you got an 8-bolt, you can still use your 8-bolt N54 flywheel. They're both the same measurements in between the N55 flywheel and the N54 8-bolt flywheel. But if you get an 8-bolt one, you'll simply have to modify your magnetic wheel so that the holes fit. You don't really care if you like weaken the structure because it's just a metal plate with like a magnetic substance on the outer side. So the interior of the metal part, you don't really care. Anyways, it gets sandwiched in between the flywheel and the crankshaft. So either way, if you get a 6-bolt or an 8-bolt crankshaft, both will work. But in my opinion, the 6-bolt is way more interesting because you can simply put back everything together. You can even put the N55 flywheel, the magnetic wheel. You don't have to do any modifications. Everything fits. Final thing you need to consider is the whole crank hub situation and the crank bolt in the front, because they are different. But then again, you can work around that. The hubs themselves, the design, they're the same height, they're the same width, and the little ends, the tips, they both fit in the N54 crankshaft. And so as you can see here, this is the N55 crankshaft bolt. It's considerably bigger than the N54 one, which is quite smaller. And it's also longer than the N54 bolt, and that goes by the design of the crank hub. Now, I got mine already modified, so I can't show you how it looked before, but essentially, the N54 crank hub has just this it has this big hole going in the middle, so the bolt fits in like this. And so you have lots of threads to go inside of your crankshaft right here. For the N55 design, as you can see already, it's an 8-bolt design for the dampener in the front. This hole right here is not supposed to be there. I'll show you why. Initially, the N55 crank hub design, the bolt just sits on the crank hub instead of going inside of it, as you can see, like this. So what I asked to do is I went to a machine shop. I said, hey, can you modify my N55 crank hub so it fits just like a N54 crank hub? And they said, yeah, sure, no problem. They made a hole, and now this thing acts exactly like a N54 crank hub whilst keeping all the N55 timing stuff. And that's pretty much the only real modification you need to do. The most important thing out of all this is the height of the crank hub, and since both of them are the same, you'll get a proper alignment with your dampener. Now, I've seen a couple comments online saying that it didn't align. That probably has to do with the dampeners being different between the N54 and the N55, but that's why we modified the N55 crank hub to fit the N54 crankshaft. By doing that, you can keep your N55 dampener, which is an 8-bolt, and insert an N54 crank bolt inside of your crankshaft so that everything bolts up perfectly and your whole timing system fits like a glove. If you're still like suspicious about this, I mean, just look at the main bearings and the rod bearings. They both fit N54 and N55s. So if you have doubts, go check my second rebuild video where I properly checked all the clearances and all that, and it's well into spec. So this just proves my point even more. Now you have a cheap forged crankshaft inside of your N55. And so yeah, I wanted to make the video because I only saw one online, and I wanted to add on to it so that there's more proof that it is possible, because when I was researching it a bit, I was a bit skeptical. There wasn't much talking about it on the internet. If you found this useful, please subscribe to the channel. I'm currently doing a rebuild series on this engine, and so if you're curious to go see, well, I invite you to go see.